So first of all, obviously Crux is unbundled. So we like to give users the choice of the underlying components that they want to bring into their infrastructure, and we really base this on top of things like Kafka and things like Facebook's RocksDB, software that's sort of that's had an awful lot of development time put into it, and so we're really benefiting from the sort of the scalability and the reliability and performance characteristics of all of those. So up until recently, as you've probably seen on the Crux infrastructure diagram, we've mainly really supported Kafka on this, and Kafka we've split up into two topics in Crux. We split it up into the transaction topic and into the document topic. And so this is an example transaction here. So let's say I'm putting a document in about Luke. We actually split this up into two. We split it up into the document itself. We then hash the document, so the document comes out with a hash of like E9. We put the document on the document topic, and the transaction with a reference to the hash on the transaction topic. It's not a hassle, but the reason we do this is so that if, for example, Luke were to come back to us later, as he's more than entitled to under sort of GDPR and I think the California, the new law in California as well, and says, I want you to remove all of my data. Right? I want you to irretrievably remove all of my data. We then only have to remove the data from the document store, and there's nothing personally identifiable in the transaction log. We've actually taken the step now within Crux to split these components out as well. So previously, the same component was responsible for both making sure that the transactions got through and making sure the documents got through. And that's fine in the case of Kafka, but there's a few others where it doesn't really make much sense to have a transaction log. And S3 is our first example where it doesn't really make sense to have, it doesn't really have the characteristics for us to use as a transaction log, but it does make a very good document store. So I've heard. Yes, user CLJ. So this is within the Crux. This is within the Crux repo. And how I've got to this, just in case you're interested in playing along at home, I can actually say playing along at home now as well, given that we're all at home. Head into the Crux repo and just run line REPL in your normal way. Connect to it in your editor, and you can use this user namespace and try it out. So what we've got here is a basic standalone configuration. At the moment, it's set up with RocksDB, and we also use an HTTP server on a fairly regular basis. So I've got that in here as well. So to use S3 as a document store, we simply have to add S3 to our topology. So I'll add this in now, S3 doc store. I'll reload that. We're just looking to see integrant come back up again. There we go. Oh. This is why you don't ever do live demos. Because I've not put a bucket in, that would be why. There we go. So I need to put in a crux.s3 bucket. And the bucket I did make earlier, it's called a crux JMS test. Let's try that again. Crux S3 bucket. There we go, bingo. So we've now got ourselves a Crux node, which is hopefully putting our documents into S3. And I can have a look at and see whether this does it by writing out a quick transaction. So let's do crux tx put crux.dbid James. And I'll put name James in here as well. And when that transaction gets submitted, as we can now see that's been submitted, what I'm going to do is just head over to S3 very quickly, and let's see that document having been put into our S3 directory. There we go. So we key them by a hash of the document, as I said. And if I were to download this, at the moment it's using Nippy by default. So if I were to download that, and then have a look at it. Temp downloads, maybe that one there. Oh, it's roughly recognizable. You can see some bits in there, but it's definitely Nippy. So that's a real basic demo as to how S3 works. Obviously, there's a whole load of S3 configuration, right? So whether it be where you get your credentials from, in this case, we use the default credential store. Whereabouts you store it within the bucket. So in this case, we're just using it from the root, and indeed how you whether you want to encrypt the documents on S3, for example, and then again how you want to serialize and deserialize them. I'm just going to give a very quick demo on how we do that. So if I add in Crux S3 configurator, and I can add this in, I can add this into my map here, and this one I am actually going to check my little crypt sheet here. Because I don't think I was going to write that out right first time. So what we need to do, need to implement one of these S3 configurators, and I've been a little bit sort of tongue-in-cheek about the name there. We may well change that one. But what I need to do is implement freeze and thaw. And in this case, freeze takes a document and needs to turn it into a byte array, and thaw takes a byte array and needs to turn it into a document. So if I evaluate, obviously I don't recommend doing this. I don't recommend changing the serialization on a real node. Halfway through, that won't go too well. But on a test node, it works quite fine. And I'm hoping now that once that refreshes, that's looking good. I've now put another transaction into it, which will hopefully override the document. And I'm hoping the size changes when I go to S3. 35 bytes. Excellent. I'll download that again. And we should now see, there we go, that's nice and plain Eden. So that's a brief introduction as to how we can then configure that S3 node. This obviously actually opens up quite a lot of possibilities, because this opens up the possibility for you to implement whatever document store you like. And if we have a look at the document store protocol, in fact, I'll just go to the S3 implementation. There's really not an awful lot to this. Document stores need to be able to submit documents and fetch documents. And this is pretty standard S3 implementation using the AWS SDK. So if you can implement submit docs and fetch docs, then yeah, you can create your own document stores, store them wherever you like. You may even have sort of document stores available already within your company. I'm sure you'll be able to implement these.